This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through all the business news stories you need to know about from Africa and beyond. Let's start with a quick run through the markets for you. So the JSE All Shares given up most of the gains that it made in the course of the week in today's session. It ended just over 1% higher, but today was broadly negative, even after Thursday's rate cuts. Naspers fell by nearly 4% at one point in trading today as a result of one of its key assets, Tencent, falling by also 5% in trading in Hong Kong. Naspers shares, remember, though, have outperformed the All Share. They're up by over 33%. The JSE, on the other hand, is down 12% so far this year. It may have restructured over $1 billion in loans over in East Africa, but KCB was still the most heavily traded counter in today's session at the NSE 20. It ended the day 0.8% higher. Here's what's coming up tonight. Nigeria's economy could contract by as much as 9% due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Chinese authorities are not setting a specific GDP growth target for 2020. And a South African delivery service is empowering young people in Cape Town. All that and more is in the pipeline for you tonight. But let's start in Nigeria, where the country's economy is forecast to shrink in one scenario by as much as 8.9% this year, if there's no fiscal stimulus whatsoever. But with a bit of stimulus, the contraction could be kept to as low as 0.59%. That is according to the country's finance minister, Zainab Ahmed. This, however, is still a deeper recession than forecast after oil prices plunged due to the coronavirus pandemic eviscerating demand. The pandemic and the oil price plunge have not only hit GDP growth, but they've also dented the country's main source of income, creating large financing needs and weakening the naira. The World Bank is planning a package for immediate fiscal relief for Nigeria. The finance ministry says the proposal is worth about $1.5 billion. Let's take a little deep into this story. Deji Badmus joins us now live from Lagos with more data. So Deji, some support measures have been announced at federal level and at state level too, including delayed tax filing deadlines, for instance, waivers on some penalties. But what other fiscal stimulus measures is Nigeria planning to roll out?
Well, we've seen quite a number that Nigeria has announced that it will be rolling out. One, of course, is what it calls the COVID-19 Intervention Fund. That's estimated at $1.4 billion and will be going to healthcare facilities now. Support for healthcare facilities, support also for as a relief now for taxpayers and also for employers to retain and possibly employ more during the lockdown. And what the government has also done is to increase the number on its social register. It has a program called the Social Investment Program. So the number of households on that register used to be 2.6 million. The government has decided to increase that now to by 1 million. So it's now 3.6 million. So 3.6 million households now who will be getting conditional cash transfers and other palliatives. And the government has said it plans to employ around 7,774 young people now across the 774 local government areas in the country. Then also important in terms of stimulus plan now, it's what the fiscal facility now that the government is expecting from the World Bank, $1.5 billion. That would be going to support the various state governments whose budget, of course, have been affected. The minister made it clear that the $1.5 billion, they intend, or the plan is to start distributing the money to the various states now by September. So these and many more, of course, the government has put in place to alleviate, so to speak, the challenges that the people and, of course, the economy faces at this time.
Indeed. So a lot of the initial projections about how this pandemic would play out initially did assume that COVID-19 might be contained in the second half of the year. But the finance minister, according to the reporting we're seeing, says the country could have 300,000 cases by August. The last data for yesterday was about 7,000 cases of COVID-19. So walk us through the latest modelling coming in from the federal government on how they expect this pandemic to play out.
To be candid, Ramah, it was when the minister actually spoke that we got that information, because before now, the NCDC, which is actually the body in charge of Nigeria's COVID-19 response in the country, has actually not said anything in terms of the modeling. I wouldn't know what the scientific modeling is. We know that for Lagos, the projection is that probably by August, the figure may be between 90,000 and 120,000. That's coming from the Lagos state government. And of course, it says it is based on the number of cases it gets on a daily basis, which is in the average now is about 100. So at the federal level, we're seeing altogether across the country on the average, we're seeing around 150 cases on the average now, 150 cases daily. Sometimes, of course, it goes far beyond that. So maybe it's on that basis that that projection is made that by August, the number would be around 300,000. But well, it's basically a projection. It's modeling. We do not know how it's going to pan out. It might not get to that number. It might exceed it. With COVID-19, nothing is actually predictable. But I wouldn't know the exact scientific modeling now that the NCDC is using, because it hasn't said so.
Indeed, it would be interesting if that data is actually made public. One last question for you. The finance minister also said that the country's oil savings account had over $250 million flowing out of it between November and the 21st of May. What was that money spent on now that there's $72 million left in that account?
Well, Ramah, you see, sometime in November last year, the National Economic Council actually held a meeting. This meeting also took place yesterday. It was after that meeting that the Minister of Finance actually came out to give that briefing. Now, this meeting took place in November, and the resolution of the meeting, that's the National Economic Council meeting, which of course is the highest economic organ in the country. A decision was reached at that meeting, of course, involving all the governors of the Federation. The decision was to use $250 million out of the $325 million in the excess crude account now, and invest in the sovereign wealth fund. So the $250 million you're talking about was actually invested in the sovereign wealth fund. That's how the money was. So I wouldn't say it was spent. It was basically invested. So that's just it. That's the reason why what you have in the excess crude account has actually come down to around $72 million. Ramah?
Indeed. We leave it there for the time being. Dej Bamless, live in Lagos. Stay safe. Now, we're still in Nigeria. A growing number of citizens there using online platforms and apps for their financial transactions and avoiding physical contacts and even physical handling of cash, obviously due to this pandemic. Experts say the government, however, may need to take advantage of this new trend if they are to improve the country's economy moving forward. CGTN's Phil Ihaza filed this report from Abuja.
Margaret Stephen is buying electricity units for her meter online. She says the outbreak of coronavirus in Nigeria has made online transactions like this a better option.
I prefer digital payments because I would stay at home and make my payments online at my own convenience instead of going to the bank where I will meet a lot of persons and be exposed to the risk of contacting COVID-19.
In January 2012, the Central Bank of Nigeria introduced a cashless policy aimed at reducing the country's heavy reliance on physical cash transactions and encouraging more citizens to use digital payments. However, according to the Apex Bank, as of 2020, only about 60% of Nigeria's over 100 million estimated adult population make use of online banking services. But with the restriction of movements across the country due to the coronavirus pandemic, many Nigerians have now started making payments via digital channels like automated teller machines and point-of-sale devices. Economic expert Andrew Ichona says beyond preventing the spread of COVID-19, digital financial transactions have enormous benefits.
It has helped people at the grassroots level to build their local economy and also to grow their livelihoods, and financial transactions simpler for the rest of us as Nigerians. So these are huge benefits that I think, if quantified in monetary terms, saves Nigeria a lot of money.
However, there are still a number of people who still prefer to go to the bank to get their transactions done. Experts say that's because many of them are concerned about the growing cases of internet fraud in Nigeria.
What I think the government should do is to, continue to sensitize the regulators, to educate the customers on the use of these technologies, because most of them in rural areas still don't understand the import of their messages, and as such, they are unable to, prevent themselves from being duped by fraudsters.
The government launched the Cybercrime Act in 2015 that imposes penalties for a variety of cybercrimes and has vowed to improve surveillance and protect online transactions across the country. While the country battles to curb the spread of COVID-19, experts say the government will also need to take advantage of this era to ensure millions of citizens adopt digital financial transactions as the new norm. This, they say, will impact Africa's largest economy. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Now, there was a little bit more relief for South Africans this week as the Reserve Bank cut the repo rate by another 50 basis points. This is the fourth cut from the SARB since the start of the year. Now, the rate at which the Reserve Bank lends money to the country's commercial banks is now at a record low, just 3.75%. The prime lending rate for South Africans is now 7.25%. Here's CGTN's Sumitra Naidu with the details.
It came as no surprise when the Reserve Bank cut the repo rate again. Many quarters, though, were hoping the bank would cut by 1%. Since the beginning of the year, the bank has reduced rates by 275 basis points. It's the most aggressive the Reserve Bank has ever been.
The COVID-19 outbreak has major health, social, and economic impacts, presenting challenges in forecasting domestic economic activity. The compilation of accurate economic statistics will also remain severely challenged. The bank currently expects GDP in 2020 to contract by 7%.
South African households will take whatever they can get at this point. Thousands have lost their jobs and many are on half pay. For those with heavy debt burdens, each time the central bank lowers rates, it's a little bit more cash flow.
Obviously, the help to consumers is quite massive. And if you look at the total interest rates decline in South Africa, it's about 42% in total from where rates were to where they are now, or about 275 basis points. And that is a lot.
The latest rate cut helped the rand strengthen to its best level in 2 months. Investors seem pleased with the Reserve Bank's moves to support the economy during this time. The Reserve Bank did warn, though, that there's only so much it can do to assist the economy.
Monetary policy, however, cannot on its own improve the potential growth rate of the economy or reduce fiscal risks. These should be addressed by implementing prudent macroeconomic policies and structural reforms that lower costs generally and increase investment opportunities, potential growth, and job creation.
The central bank is expecting a 7% contraction in GDP this year.
We're not dealing with a normal recession here. There is usually a balance sheet recession where expenditure or consumption is decreasing. So we're dealing with a cash flow recession. The government has told businesses to stop. People are not operating. A lot more scope for fiscal policy is needed.
South Africans are being advised to make good use of these rate cuts to pay off debt and save. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
On to some corporate headlines now. Starting in the world of construction, Dangote Cement has reported record cement sales following a surge from its home market of Nigeria. Revenue for the first quarter is up by nearly 4%, $647 million. Net earnings came in at $155.4 million. Elsewhere, earnings at Sasol are expected to drop by at least 20%. This follows the rise in debt incurred by the company and a decline in chemical and oil prices. Sasol's report for the fiscal year to June 30th is due to be released on the 7th of August. The CEO of South Africa's power utility Eskom says it could become financially viable and do so without bailouts if it could more than halve its debt to about $11.2 billion. Eskom produces more than 90% of the electricity used in Africa's most industrialized economy, but the firm has battled just to keep the lights on, and that has helped to push the country into recession even before the COVID-19 pandemic. And finally, Ethiopia's government is expected to sell a 40% stake in Ethio Telecom. This is part of efforts to open up the world's last major closed telecommunications market in a country of about 100 million people. Foreign companies and investors have been invited to bid for a piece of the monopoly operator. The government will retain ownership, however, of the remaining 60%. That's the run through your company headlines. You're watching Global Business Africa. Here's what's coming up shortly. Eased shopping restrictions are breathing life into South Africa's economy. We'll have the details. And the 10-cent charity foundation has donated medical supplies to Ethiopia. The details are coming up shortly.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay, we'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Nairo. Hello, Nairo.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back to the program. E-commerce platforms are booming in South Africa after the government there reversed a ban on using them for commerce just over a week ago. With the exception of alcohol and cigarettes, there's really no limit on what you can buy and sell online. And online retailers are also committing to giving more space to local producers. All of this has helped to breathe a bit of life into the South African economy, which ground to a halt for more than a month as part of measures to curb the spread of COVID-19. Here's CGTN's Julie Shire with that story.
Online daily deals platform One Day Only has had its hands full since the e-commerce ban was lifted. Staff adhere to strict safety measures and customer packages are treated with great care. Over 2,000 products are received and dispatched daily, from its Johannesburg warehouse.
It's been a really long, hard struggle over the last 2 months with having to swing the business around. And I think we've done incredibly well to pivot it and to supply so-called essential and level 4 items to our customers over the last 2 months. But it really is a big relief to be able to extend that base to all items except for wine and tobacco.
South Africa is expected to fall into recession after business activity was halted for close to 6 weeks to deal with the coronavirus. Locally made products are being pushed to inject some life into the economy as lockdown restrictions ease.
We are constantly looking at companies that are employing locally. So, for example, we've sold so many face masks. Those are just small businesses with machinists who can actually provide for their families. So that's been incredible. And we are starting to do days that are specifically focused on supporting local products. So really giving major attention to it. And hopefully that will mean an increase in employment for, smaller businesses that are locally producing, which is a really big driver.
Retailers saw a 200% boom in online grocery shopping when lockdown was in full force. There's now a growing appetite for other goods.
It has been very, very hard for people to be at home. Gyms are closed. So things like treadmills and running machines today, in fact, we're really focusing just on fitness items, kettlebells and exercise mats, etc. But in addition to that, people are at home. So they're really focusing on their home beds, for example, kitchen items, air fryers, instant pots. So a lot of those kind of items. And then, of course, you've got clothing, a lot of winter clothing.
Online sales are shaping to beat estimates by 2 years. A 2% share of the $60 billion retail sales market, which was expected in 2022, is now likely to be achieved by the end of this year.
A lot of my shopping has actually moved online, and I see the trends as well across family members, friends, colleagues, and so forth. Being able to do that shopping online removes that fear. It's almost like a matter of life and death to an extent, in a sense that it frees you, it gives you the convenience that you need. You can be with your family and you can also be safe.
Since government lifted the e-commerce ban, South African online sales have exploded. Before the pandemic, e-commerce in Africa lagged behind compared to other parts of the world, but now these platforms seem to be the solution to many people's fears. Julie Shar, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
The Chinese organization Tencent Charity Foundation has donated medical supplies to Ethiopia's Ministry of Health. That donation is meant to help efforts to contain the spread of COVID-19.
Speaking at the Bole International Airport after receiving donations sent by Tencent Charity Foundation, Ethiopia's health minister said the medical supplies will help combat the spread of coronavirus in the country.
I would really like to take this opportunity on behalf of the Minister of Health to really appreciate, express my sincere gratitude to this generous donation, which will play an instrumental role in the priorities and strategies we have in the COVID response. As we all know, enhancing testing and expanding testing is one of our key strategies to ensure the mitigation of this pandemic, and we are working hard as a country to expand our testing all over the country.
On his part, the Chinese ambassador to Ethiopia said ties between China and Ethiopia are anchored on a strong foundation of mutual understanding and cooperation. He also supported Ethiopian Airlines' decision not to suspend flights despite the spread of coronavirus.
I wish to thank the Ethiopian Airlines for the support. I understand that my good friend, he might be under a lot of criticism and a lot of pressure for not suspending the flights to China, including the passenger flight. I wish to highlight to all the journalists that ever since the outbreak of the COVID-19, I think in January, there has not been a single imported case from China, not a single one. So I think it's a good decision, it's a wise decision. And I think Ethiopian Airlines has a strong sense of responsibility as the carrier between China and Ethiopia, between China and Africa.
Ethiopia's health minister also commended Chinese President Xi Jinping's pledge of $2 billion in the fight against coronavirus.
At the 73rd World Health Assembly that just happened this week, early this week, China has announced that it will support the global efforts by allocating $2 billion to the global efforts, especially focusing the support for Africa. So this is really a huge milestone for the whole response through WHO. This support will be coordinated, and we are, as a country and as a continent, really grateful for this kind of solidarity and partnership.
The medical donation includes test kits, gloves and face masks, valued in total at about $1.6 million. Tencent Charity Foundation is owned and run by Tencent Holdings, which is one of the biggest global players in the technology sector. The Chinese firm is known for its WeChat messaging app. Mohammed Abubakar, CGTN.
You're watching Global Business. Time for another break. Here's what's coming up shortly. We'll explore why China has not set a GDP growth target for 2020. And Singapore's wet market produce goes online amid the coronavirus pandemic.
No one again began holding guns. Machine guns from police forces towards the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
The Excellency, thank you very much for your time now. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Welcome back. Let's run through some of the stories making your headlines at this hour. Nigeria's economy could shrink by as much as 8.9% in 2020 in a worst-case scenario without any fiscal stimulus. That's a deeper recession than forecast after oil prices plunged by over 50% due to the coronavirus pandemic eviscerating demand. However, the World Bank is planning a $1.5 billion package for immediate fiscal relief for Nigeria that could be dispersed as soon as September. Elsewhere, 10 European nations have issued a joint statement regretting the United States' withdrawal from the Open Skies Treaty. US President Donald Trump announced the withdrawal on Thursday. This is the latest move to abandon a major international arms control agreement. The European nations say they consider the treaty to be a crucial element of a confidence-building framework that has been created over decades. And finally, Pakistan's army has been deployed to the site of a passenger plane that crashed on Friday in the commercial capital of Karachi. Reuters is reporting that 99 passengers and crew on board that aircraft. Officials are reporting at least one survivor, with more than 11 bodies having been recovered so far. It is not yet known, however, if there are further victims on the ground. That's a run through your headlines. Now, authorities in China are not setting a specific GDP growth target for 2020. That's directly from the Premier Li Keqiang, and as he addressed the National People's Congress. Of course, this year's session opened this morning in Beijing after a 2-month delay due to the coronavirus pandemic. Zhang Yibing has more.
现在，请默哀。
A minute's silence to mourn the martyrs and compatriots who died in China's fight against the novel coronavirus. Premier Li Keqiang praised the society-wide efforts to control sources of infection and contain the spread.
Together, we have waged an all-out people's war against the virus.
Premier Li said efforts must be redoubled to minimize the losses resulting from the virus. And he stressed the need for flexibility for targets.
I would like to point out that we have not set a specific target for economic growth this year. This is because our country will face some factors that are difficult to predict in its development due to the great uncertainty regarding the COVID-19 pandemic and the world economic and trade environment.
The Premier said stabilizing employment and ensuring living standards are key. Li Keqiang emphasized that on the way to eradicating absolute poverty and building a moderately prosperous society, no one will be left behind. He said governments at all levels must truly tighten the belt, and China will not let up on any front of its long-term fight against COVID-19, nor will it lose any time in advancing China's economic and social development agenda. Li vows to create the better business environment. The negative list for foreign investment will be significantly shortened, and China will grant great autonomy in reform and opening up to pilot-free trade zones.
We will foster an enabling market environment in which all companies, Chinese and foreign, are treated equals and engaged in fair competition.
Lawmakers will deliberate the bill on reviewing an NPC draft decision on the legal system and enforcement mechanisms for the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region to safeguard national security. The Premier said the central government will adhere to the major principles and policies on work related to Taiwan and resolutely oppose and deter any separatist activities seeking Taiwan independence. A draft civil code will be submitted for final deliberation. It will incorporate provisions on individual rights into the separate section of the code and help deepen the legal protection of personal dignity and individual rights. In the coming week, China's legislators will review the draft laws, the government work report, and other important issues. They say they will lay a solid foundation for the victory in the ongoing fight against COVID-19 and secure a decisive victory in fighting against poverty and building the moderately prosperous society in all respects. Zheng Yibing, CGTN, Beijing.
Wuhan is home to some of China's most famous brands and manufacturers. They are among tens of thousands of enterprises located in the city's economic and technological development zone. With all of them having resumed production, business is more or less back to pre-outbreak levels. CGTN's Hu Chao takes you there.
Automobile manufacturing has been a pillar industry for Wuhan. The city's economic and technological development zone has 7 automobile companies and 12 assembly factories. More than 1 million vehicles are produced here. Headquartered in Wuhan, the Dongfeng Automobile Group is the city's industry leader. All 3 of its factories have resumed normal production, with a daily production of over 3,000 vehicles. That means 1 vehicle is made every 50.1 seconds. The company has 12,000 workers in Wuhan. Consistent prevention measures against the virus have ensured the health of workers and normal production.
All staff have their temperatures checked 4 times a day and change their masks 3 times a day. They also eat and take breaks separately.
Here we've arrived at a branch factory of renowned Chinese air conditioner brand Meidi in suburban Wuhan. As temperatures keep climbing, consumers' need for air conditioning has also been rising, and that keeps the production lines here quite busy.
The company head says early on, the COVID-19 outbreak had suppressed many consumer needs, which started to lighten up in April. Now the brand can sell around 170,000 air conditioners a day.
Our production volume in April was more than the same period last year, and we expect the volume in May will exceed last year's by 35%.
This air conditioning factory has a total of 4,500 workers. By early April, they had all resumed work. Nucleic acid testing is a key measure to ensure safe production.
In March, we arranged nucleic acid testing and antibody testing for every worker after they came back, which greatly helped to ensure safety in the factory.
Local authorities have also been helping companies.
We have funding of over 2 billion yuan to benefit companies who are in need. So far, more than 100 companies have received 15 million yuan of the capital. Later, some 400 million yuan will also be used to help struggling businesses out of their predicaments.
The Economic Development Zone has more than 370 enterprises above the designated size. The total production volume in April reached 24 billion yuan, more than that of the same period last year. Hu Chao, CGTN, Wuhan.
China's 5-year economic plans have long been an important part of its economic planning and execution. The country, in fact, will have implemented its 13th 5-year plan by the end of this year. In the first episode of Changing China by the Numbers, we'll take a look at how the country has pushed its plan for green and quality development in the last 5 years.
This year marks the conclusion of China's 13th 5-year plan, focused on concepts such as technological innovation, green energy, and reform and opening up. The development plan set the target of achieving higher quality growth. Green development is seen in China's improving energy mix. By the end of 2019, the proportion of coal power dropped nearly 14 percentage points compared to 10 years ago. A majority of that seems to be compensated by greener energy sources, such as natural gas, hydro, nuclear, and wind power, which grew 11.4 percentage points in the energy mix. Ecological well-being is also part of China's plan for green development, as Chinese President Xi Jinping specifically mentioned that clear waters and green mountains are invaluable assets. Over the years, China's forest coverage rate grew to 23% by 2019 from just under 13% in the mid-1970s. In the meantime, stronger Chinese industries have also started to make their presence felt in the world. In 2019, the number of Chinese companies in the Fortune 500 took over those of America for the first time. And analysts attributed this to China's continuous efforts to expand domestic demand as more Chinese metal producers, construction companies, and vehicle manufacturers made the list. Other Chinese companies that made the list include those in the field of high-tech and telecommunications. The Global Innovation Index shows China climbing the ladder each year, ranking 14th in 2019, a remarkable leap from just 8 years ago. And the same report also shows Beijing and the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area among the top 5 innovative cities and regions in the world. The reforms also push China closer towards high-end manufacturing. By promoting innovation, China has started to gain an advantage in core technologies. Examples of this include successful tests of C919 airliners, as well as its leading role in 5G technology.
Now, wet markets are a fairly common sight across Asia. In Singapore, pandemic restrictions have made some vendors find ways to replicate that shopping experience online. And that, in turn, has started to attract a whole new set of clients. CGTN's Mirulu explains.
The hustle and bustle of wet markets bursting with fresh, tasty produce are a familiar sight and sound to many Singaporeans. Part of the nation's cultural heritage and identity, wet markets act as a hub of the community and a meeting point for the older generation. The outbreak of the coronavirus in the city-state, however, has put a dampener on visitors to wet markets, with the population advised to avoid busy public spaces.
Ever since the beginning of this year, the wet market business has been down due to the COVID-19. People are trying to avoid crowds as much as possible. And during the circuit breaker, the business is going even lower due to the the strict measures that we have to stay home, and some of them being quarantined, etc. And when cases are getting worse, people are cautious about coming out.
Singapore has been under a partial lockdown since the beginning of April. In order to drum up trade and to keep buyers and sellers safe, Singapore's Infocom Media Development Authority collaborated with a group of store owners at the country's largest wet market, Tekka Wet Market, to bring the shopping experience to the comfort of people's homes.
We have mustard leaf. You can fry your mee goreng. You can make a stir fry with pork or chicken or beef, what have you.
Nowadays, you can see that people are going online to buy vegetables because the younger ones are usually more tech savvy. So they are trying to, get the groceries in a more convenient way.
Going digital has not only allowed store owners to reach a younger demographic, but also customers in different localities.
Tekka Center especially is very big wet market, and you can find anything you need, and you can find products that you can't find elsewhere. I've recently come to know that they have started to sell online. This is definitely something that I'm willing to try, especially for all the products that I can't find elsewhere.
During the first Tekka Wet Market online sales, there was overwhelming support and attendance, with customers eager to buy fresh produce and support their local store owners. Although born out of necessity due to the pandemic, moving the wet market online could be part of Singapore's now accelerated vision of becoming a digital economy. Mirolu, CGTN, Singapore.
Chinese doctors have held face-to-face talks with officials from the World Health Organization in Algeria to discuss the COVID-19 situation over there. The Chinese medical team is in the country to share information about how they dealt with the COVID-19 pandemic. CGTN's He Weiwei has more from Algiers.
The meeting between doctors from China and WHO officials in Algeria lasted for 2 hours. Algeria has one of the highest numbers of COVID-19 cases in Africa, nearly 8,000. It's currently seeing a daily increase of about 180 new cases.
The WHO headquarters in Geneva sent 6 experts to Algeria in January under my supervision to provide necessary support.
Severe cases is not that much important for the time being. So many of these cases which are reported are probably mild cases or moderate cases. Few of them seems to be severe cases. So the load on the health system is not that very high at that extreme.
China has so far sent about 20 medical teams to various countries to help combat the virus. This is the first time that one of those teams has met directly with the WHO.
We visited the health ministry, central pharmacy and some hospitals. We feel that the situation of the coronavirus in the country is stable and controllable.
We are the WHO classified emergency medical team. We hope through this meeting we will have an opportunity to collaborate with WHO Algeria country office.
The meeting comes after Chinese President Xi Jinping pledged $2 billion over the next 2 years to help other countries fight the pandemic and to accelerate the building of African centers for disease control and prevention. He Weiwei, CGTN, Algiers.
All right, then a quick run through some commodity news now for you. Both WTI and the Brent essentially falling by a fair bit in trading today, around 4% or so. There is some positive news, though, for some oil majors, Royal Dutch Shell and Eni in particular. Court in the UK has tossed out a case that Nigeria had filed 2 years ago, alleging that the two firms paid bribes in order to get the operational license for OPL 245. It's a deep offshore oil field with a fair bit of oil in it. The court argued, look, there is absolutely no jurisdiction for us in this matter, but that isn't quite the end of it. Here's what's coming up next. We'll look at a delivery service in South Africa that's empowering young people in Cape Town. And Senegalese shoppers are finding a small bit of comfort amid all the chaos of this pandemic.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. South Africa's Cloudy Deliveries is on a mission to enhance the entrepreneurial spirit among young people, even amidst this pandemic. The pedal-powered delivery service is operated by a group of young people who use their bicycles to deliver much-needed goods door-to-door as people comply with the lockdown. CGTN's Travis Andrews has the details from Cape Town on Grassroots tonight.
They're young, fit and full of exuberance, but also have a strong sense of civic duty. Put all that together and you get a delivery service on two wheels that is putting the big players to shame. Cloudy Deliveries is run by a bunch of youths who are using their bicycles as a quick and simple method of delivering goods like food and medicines between stores and people's homes. With many still under lockdown, their services have become much needed.
People are not deliver food for them because they are scared to go out of the COVID-19 thing. That's why. And people don't want to go out because there are a lot of crowding outside so they can get the virus. You see, so they don't want to spread to the children or stuff like that, to the siblings or to the other friends or neighbors.
At just $1 for any delivery within their community, the boys are giving established players like Uber Eats and Mr. Delivery a run for their money. Plus, they're much quicker and more mobile. And on a busy day, their phones usually ring off the hook.
Since lockdown, we have business like Langa business deliveries boys. Between deliveries in Langa, like lockdown, when you in home, we'll be here for you and we'll endure. Between things like food we deliver to your home, and we go to the like ShopRite and Boxer. So we buy things that we want.
Many in the community see no need to venture out and put themselves at risk of contracting the virus. Cloudy Delivery's recipe for success has not just been its price, but community buy-in, as most people are still holed up in their homes. But as the regulations begin to ease, their business is expected to boom. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
On to Senegal now. Shoppers over there have found one bit of comfort amid all the chaos that this pandemic is inflicting on all of us, really, right across the world. It comes in the form of a particular fish that's right at the heart of their national dish. Here's CGTN's Mohammed Abubakar now reporting that the fishermen and the industries that support them have been hit fairly hard by this pandemic.
At a market in the northern port city of St. Louis, the streets are flooded with white grouper stock caught off the Atlantic coast. The fish is commonly known as theof in the local language. Served as a marinated delicacy on a bed of spicy rice, the dish has grown widely popular among the locals in recent years. However, the plummeting of costs in recent weeks, owing to the outbreak of the novel coronavirus, has brought about unforeseeable changes.
When this cursed disease arrived, all borders were closed, so it stopped all exports. Everything we produce, we have to consume. Chof is extremely expensive for the ordinary Senegalese, and its price has been lowered locally because that type of fish was meant to be for the foreign market. But now it's consumed locally.
Before, chof was $7 per kilo. It was expensive, so as a vendor, it did not work for me. But now at $4 a kilo, I can buy some for my own consumption and sell the rest. It's really more accessible because planes are not flying anymore because of corona.
High demand from overseas escalated problems for many locals. It saw prices rise steeply, partly due to scarcity, global warming and overfishing by foreign trawlers. But now government emergency measures that will help tackle the spread of COVID-19 pave the way for the sale of theof in local markets.
Now, the chof is much cheaper because it does not sell as easily as before. So whatever amount of money you have, you'll be able to buy some.
Some customers are enjoying the resurgence of the noble fish as it is known in the main coastal cities. But for the artisanal fishermen, business has been disrupted by the government's implemented measures.
We are fishermen. All we know is the sea. We work on the sea. We have departure times, but we don't have specific times for when we come back. We can leave in the morning and come back just before sunset. But now timings have been imposed from 5 p.m. No one is allowed to work. The government should have tried to understand us. As soon as we come back from fishing expeditions, they should have allowed us to sell our catch.
Fishing is an important foreign exchange earner for the country, making up 16% of Senegal's GDP. With the restrictions hampering operations, the fishing industry is reeling with losses estimated in millions.
There is no work anymore. Because of the restrictions, we had to let go of 10 employees. Now we only have 5 people working, and we pay them every month. It's hard. They need to lower the price of electricity and water. Everything is expensive here. We used to work 24 hours a day. Now we barely work for 6 hours a day.
The impact of the coronavirus on Senegal's fishing industry has seen its focus drop 3.9%. Many fear businesses in the sector could fail to recover for a long time. Mohammed Abubakar, CGTN.
And finally, let's over to Abidjan, the commercial capital of Cote d'Ivoire. It's slowly starting to open up after government there relaxed restrictions implemented to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. Bars and restaurants have reopened for the first time since March. And while this is a breath of fresh air for most Ivorians, restaurant owners are still counting their losses. CGTN's Terry Wangari reports.
For months, people have been celebrating special occasions virtually at home due to the coronavirus pandemic. But last week, President Alassane Ouattara eased restrictions and allowed for the reopening of restaurants, bars, and open-air eateries known as maquis. Ivorians like Lorraine Greer are now able to celebrate birthdays outside with their loved ones.
I am happy because the restrictions have been eased a little and I've been able to make contact with my friends and renew the links between us that were lost in a way.
But the restaurant owners are not celebrating just yet. They have to recoup losses dating back to March when Abidjan went into a partial lockdown and imposed a curfew. Public establishments need to adhere to strict rules, disinfect the premises, and apply safe distancing between tables, all of which cost money.
We started up again, but it's like we're throwing the key under the mat. We have no stock. Each morning when I come in, I get a bit from the market so we can start up again. We reopened on Monday. We should have reopened on Friday, but I couldn't because we had to disinfect the place. It costs money, but we managed to do it, and so we opened Monday. But it's hard. It's hard because we don't really have the means to start again.
Even at the normally busy and bustling maquis, the mood is timid. For those who dare to go out, it is a breath of fresh air, a break from the monotony and loneliness of confinement.
It feels good because being confined is not very pleasant. It really isn't. And when you go out and meet everyone, it's cheerful. It feels good. It really feels good.
First of all, it's joy. And we hope that we'll be able to keep this atmosphere. And why not? I mean, find a way. Once we conquer the illness, everything will get back to what it was.
I feel good because with the lockdown, everyone was at home. There was no school and everything, so as today is my birthday, I wanted to come and eat something on my own. And it feels like a deconfinement, as the president said. So I am happy that I came alone to eat something for my birthday.
Very few customers have ventured into restaurants for fear of getting infected.
Before the closure, it was doing better than now. It was doing well. Really, it was okay. With the closure from the coronavirus until now, honestly, it's hard to make ends meet.
We've been here since Friday. We spend the whole day here but never get more than 3 to 4 tables. For example, today we had 2 couples. One couple who went in there to eat and the other couple who went over there. There is a girl who came to ask for a takeout but in the end decided to eat here.
Although the curfew was lifted, night bars, cinemas, theatres and concert halls are still closed until May 31st. Music is not allowed in public places in order to limit the number of people going out and to control the crowds. The government says it wants a gradual return to normal as it assesses the progress of the pandemic in Cote d'Ivoire. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
All right, then a quick run through the currencies for you. So Kenya's next rate-setting meeting is taking place next week on the 27th of May. On the FX side, the Kenyan shilling weakened yet again. 106.9 was as low as it went today. That's relatively close to the all-time close of about 107.3. Nigeria's central bank governor is also lashing out at the parallel foreign currency market again today, even as the country continues to struggle with dollar shortages. The country's rate-setting meeting will be held for just one day. It's usually a 2-day affair. It's going to be held on the 28th of May, sometime next week. That's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen on the programme in the last hour. There are many ways to get your thoughts back to us, all of them on your screens right now. I'm Ramah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. The news continues on CGTN.